Hi, Anthony here, and today I want to make a video on the spirit that I ended up discerning in a time of prayer and something that God wanted me to make a video about and speak to you guys about. And it's kind of gonna go into political matters, and it's really on the subject of a spirit and its influence regarding mass immigration and free speech. So, first, I want to talk about the spirit. What's the spirit that I discern? What are its effect on people? And how it affects free speech, kind of a movement of quelling down and stopping people talking about topics like mass immigration, and also the associations to a true and documented theory that we call the theory of replacement, which I believe is, and I believe God confirmed to me to be absolutely true in regards to mass immigration and importation of the third world people into first world countries. So, first and foremost, I want to describe a bit the spirit that I was able to discern, the one that God revealed to me. And if I could describe it in two words, it's a spirit of toxic positivity. It's of this kind of niceness or politeness that doesn't want to offend, and it's and that doesn't want to be seen as offensive. And how it affects the mind of people is it's through censorship in two ways. First of all, self censorship, and then a censorship of others. And it's closely related to this idea of mass immigration, a topic that often people who have tried to talk about those things, this idea of replacement of white Western countries, have been often called racist, bigoted, and told to, shut up or just cancel in a way. And how really there's a dynamic, there's actually spirit influencing this dynamic that is affecting the mind of people, which is making them kind of like monkeys see no evil, hide their faces from the problems, or the multiculturalism, which doesn't really work, and the importation of cultures that don't work out together, which we're going to go through the statistics of how there has been increased rape, increased violence, increased crime, and the dissolution of the social fabric through this mass immigration process, which is intentionally meant to replace the white population and fracture those sovereign societies. So, and there's an aspect of that spirit too. The way it was shown to me, it's kind of this a dark feminine, a toxic feminine. It functioned out of this toxic feminine energy. If we were to, let's say, define the masculine and the feminine quickly, if the masculine was the idea of protecting the household, creating boundaries, providing, then the feminine would be embracing love, nurturing, making sure that the child within the household get along together. Another small example: if you had a child that was told multiple times, be careful, don't run down the stairs, or you'll fall. And then there's a child that runs down the stairs and he falls and he hurts himself. What do you imagine the father in the family would say to the child? Most often it's like, hey, we told you don't run down the stairs. And then, it's kind of the rules, the boundaries to be careful not to hurt yourself. We told you not to do things that would lead to a bad example. And the feminine would be kind of this more nurturing, like, are you okay? Wanted to take care of. And this dark femininity, this false kindness, this care that masquerades, this false care, or a humanitarian care that is taken advantage of. And you can probably see the links between that and mass immigration, wanting to better the situation. Almost this idea of this almost this divine quality that Jesus preached about taking care of the others, of our neighbors. But the thing is, it's kind of a twist to it, because it says that, but it doesn't. It hides its face. It acts like everything is going all right and there's no problem within the society where it's accepted. It has the good intention, but not the good application. It is why it hides behind this religious veneer. Another link I want to make between cancel culture, again, and this toxic femininity, is this idea that normally, when it comes to confrontation, often guys, we confront each other face to face. But when it comes to the feminine, like in school or in the workplace, there's often some backstabbing, an attempt to destroy the reputation from behind, not necessarily confrontational. And there's this aspect as if our society had been so drenched into that into that toxicity that it uses cancel culture as its manifestation. They want to censorship, they want to call racist to destroy the reputation of those we oppose. And there's this link between the two. So again, this idea of trying to save the third world in detriment to safe boundaries and actually safety within the neighbors in our own communities. This kind of open-heartedness which get taken advantage of because there are spiritual influences, people who want to take advantage of that. And there's also this idea of, diversity is our strength, or multiculturalism. Those ideas have been preached a lot, especially in our liberal societies. That has kind of been a funnel for those ideas, for accepting those ideas instead of realizing common values, or perhaps a love of our nationality, or wanting to take care of people around us before taking care of the whole world. So there's this leftist worldview and this idea of cultural relativity too that plays into it, where we see all cultures are equal. We don't want to say no one culture is better than the other, even though people who preach that might not want to step outside of their own Western societies, like maybe the Middle East, where women might not be treated the best compared to the West. And there's a sentence that Gad Saad kind of coined, which is this idea of a suicidal empathy.
So parasitic thinking, one of the reasons I think that book did so well is because it really explained how all of these parasitic ideas came to a head together. And they were all spawned on university campuses over the past 40 to 80 years. Suicidal empathy results in you caring more about the perpetrator than the victim. That's suicidal empathy, right? Because that argument, so here's how that leftist argument works. If a person, especially a criminal of color, commits a crime, that's probably because he grew up as a person of color, so he's already been marginalized by the society.
Right.
So now he commits a crime. You're now double whamming him by putting him in the penal system. So you need to be more caring. So he's already got 57 previous arrests. Let's give him a 58th chance. So again, I don't think it comes from really parasitized thinking, right? So I think where we may differ is you think it's because there is a duplicitous evil, let's cause havoc, whereas I think they actually believe that that's the noble position, right? And there should be no borders. There is no illegal human. What kind of is this? Why do you have a lock on your door?
And I feel this is what the spirit leads to, this toxic positivity. Nothing's going. We can invite the whole world, and there's no problem. Monkey see no evil. There's nothing wrong with mass immigration. There's no replacing nothing. And really now I want to go to the stats of really, okay, what is the damage that mass immigration is actually causing? So basically, around 2015 or 2013, during that period, there was a lot of conflict in Syria. If we look at timeline, Syrian conflicts in the Middle East that lead to 1.3 million asylum seekers from countries like Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And a lot of those asylum seekers were sent to places like Sweden. The thing is, we see a lot of in those countries. There's been really we actually see a correlation between this increase in 2015. There's been this increase in asylum seekers, and then also an increase of rapes, terrorist attacks, culturally often Muslim immigration that comes in and into Western countries. And so let's just go through the statistics. In Poland, data from Dutch police indicates that there's been a considerable overrepresentation of individuals from non-Western immigration backgrounds in sexual offenses, accounting maybe for 36% of accused in 2022 alone. In France, Home Affairs Ministry's data, they reveal the same pattern in the Ile-de-France region's public transportation system, which is used by 8 million passengers daily. Foreign nationals account for 62% of the perpetrators for sexual violence. In Italy, according to Italian National Institute of Statistics, in 2018 to 2021, in the period of 2018 to 2021, there's been a 41% of rapes were committed by foreigners, while they make only 8% of the population. In Sweden, there's a recent study that has been revealed that 63% of convicted rapists in Sweden from 2000 to 2020 have had a foreign background or parents of foreign origins. And this study analyzed over 4,000 legal cases, highlighting that immigrants who represent approximately 25% of Swedish population, they're disproportionately involved in rape conviction. And this is the problem, and the goal really is not to make all foreigners or immigrants to target, but to realize that there is in fact a need in a change of method where, like the Dalai Lama said, we should have the goal of, if we let asylum seekers in, it should be so they can return to their country to build. But what we have is, we have a mixing of two different cultures. We have a lack of actually integration and a destruction, which I believe is actually an intentionally planned to actually bring the destruction of sovereignty. And why would anybody want that? Well, there's always this globalist, the people who are for open borders for, citizens of the world, who would have advantage of, tend to have this authoritarian bait where they like this idea of a global government that would have a centralized government, or some would say one world order, where a lot of few people could have a lot of authority to, bring about this universal utopia where you would own nothing but be happy. Nobody would own but the government. This central government would all redistribute. This is kind of the globalist idea.
So what is globalism? Globalism often gets confused with globalization. Globalization is an economic process. It's where nations interact through the trade of technology, products, information, and jobs. There are definitely pros and cons to globalization, but that's not the topic for today. But globalism, that's not an economic process. It refers to an ideology. The ideology of globalism promotes the idea that all people are citizens of the world, rather than a country. In its most extreme form, there would be no barriers to migration, and no group identity based on nationality. International governmental organizations would be more powerful than individual governments. Some people say this would eventually lead to a unified world government. When people refer to someone as a globalist, they're referring to people who have broadly two main goals. The first one is collective decision-making. Globalists see the world as a collection of one big people, rather than groups divided up by nations. Some argue that there needs to be more collective decision-making because, as the World Economic Forum puts it, global issues require global solutions. They argue that the complexity of the global issues is far too big for any party to tackle alone, which is why globalists push for what's called global rule of law. It's the idea that a higher authority can and should override individual countries' authority. And it requires governments, corporations, and organizations to put international law above their own self-interest.
It's not happening by accident. People are flooding into the United States at the southern border unchecked. They have no idea about their backgrounds. They don't know whether they are...
And don't care.
And they seem
and don't
to
care.
They don't care. And the same thing is happening across the English Channel. We're having boatloads of people coming in. And Rishi Sunak wrings his hands and says, well, we're still connected to the EU, so the ECHR, the European Council for Human Rights legislation, still applies. But if he was really serious about it, he would say to the EU, we're not having that, and stop them at the source. But what's happening there is the French Navy are taking them halfway across, the British Navy are meeting them halfway and taking them in. You couldn't make it up. So there is a globalist agenda, and I believe that mass illegal migration is being used quite deliberately to destabilize independent sovereign countries like the United States, like the United Kingdom. It's happened in France. It's happened in other European countries. It's happening in Australia. It's happening in New Zealand. And it's happening in Canada.
In Sweden, there was this festival in 2014, 2015, at the moment where the mass immigration was happening, where there were 38 different reports of rape and sexual assault that were filed. It was a Stockholm festival. And apparently it was a case that mirrored an assault on New Year's Eve in the German city of Cologne. So you see how it happens in multiple places in Europe. And this is what a police officer said. We certainly should have publicly released this information, no doubt. Why it did not happen, we simply do not know. And you have other cases, what happens is, and there's this pattern of, actually the police or certain officers not wanting to release the information because they say they don't want to be, racist, or they don't want people to have more fuel, more tools to say, oh, okay, to fuel people's racism, they say, because they know that non-foreign people are mostly overrepresented because they know that foreign individuals of non-Swedish origin or non-European origins are more represented in those sexual assault cases. And I remember reading about how they would sometimes have a gang of immigrants who would go gather around a Swedish person, young ladies, and they would kind of act as this barrier between other people, and they would kind of assault her, and they wouldn't allow her to get away. There's a lot of these cases of increased rapes that we see, and the censorship always tied to it, because we want to be nice, polite. We don't want to offend. We want people to think that we're racist. That's the pattern, the cycle that keeps happening. In UK, there's the grooming gangs.
They are the child groomers who got away with it for so long because authorities completely failed to protect young vulnerable children. The grooming gangs have slowly emerged from English towns like Derby, Telford, Oxford, Rochdale and Rotherham, and there have been damning assessments of these failures to act before now.
The abusers in this case were, in the main, British Pakistani men, and they were preying on young white girls. Now, this was a fact that the authorities didn't really want to say out loud at the time. They were worried it would have a serious effect on communities. They were worried that it would sound racist.
Where 264 people have been convicted for the specific crime of gang groomings since 2005, and those offenders, they were 222 of them, or 84% of them were Asians. And what's interesting, the form of censorship that it says, it says they were, from the continent of Asia. It doesn't specify the, as you see in these pictures, where they were Middle Eastern, because they say Asians. There's an intentional trying to hide this reality. And the thing is, when it comes to censorship in the UK, there's an important person when we need to talk about, which is the Tommy Robinson, an independent journalist who was vital in his role to bring awareness to those grooming gangs in the UK, who is currently in jail for contempt of court in regards to the so-called spreading of defamatory statements in regard to a school incident involving a Syrian refugee and an English student.
I'm being prosecuted, it's gone to the High Court, and I have to prove, I made a video stating that it was a lie, stating that Jamal wasn't innocent, and telling some facts about Jamal beating up girls, an instance that I'd been warned about by the members of this community to tell the truth about what happened at this school. I've got to prove it in court, so I've come to Huddersfield. I'm now going to knock. I need to find witnesses. I've got addresses for many. I need to knock and talk to them and see who I can get to come to court to help me prove to you, the public. This is about as much as proving in court as proving to you, the British public, that I was the only journalist in the country who told the truth about what happened in this community. The story you were told. You were told that a vulnerable Syrian child refugee had been bullied and waterboarded by a nasty white boy. You were told it was a racist attack. You were told of the dangers of far-right extremism. You were invited to agree that this kind of intolerance could not be tolerated. Was he vulnerable? Was it a racist attack? Our evidence shows the answers to both these questions was no. Was the Syrian lad waterboarded? Why was this word used? What about this? Was that waterboarding? Take a look at this. It shows a group of non-white children beating up a white girl. It went viral online, but it wasn't touched by the mainstream media. It wasn't made into a global story.
this scene that was filmed was actually the end result of a lot of time of building up of bullying that didn't originate from the English student, but actually a Syrian refugee, which he had many testimonies through a hidden camera that he was able to record about people, and a lot of teachers, a lot of staff at the school, even other students who would see the Syrian refugee as being really problematic. But ultimately, the court judged that all those unverified anecdotes and selective interpretations did not meet the legal threshold to justify those defamatory statements, because he ended up publishing this movie Silence, which talks about this whole event. And this caused him to get the court injunction and to be sentenced in October 28, 2024. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison, which he has been actually doing 5.5 months so far. So what I believe is happening here is to a man that's being speaking about realities that the UK government wants to keep hidden, and through a lot of those liberal ideology that don't want to make to, again, this act again of wanting to censor anything that seems to indicate that the asylum seeker, the immigrant, is somehow problematic. And with the use of the legal system, the media, and the government as tool to censor, I feel Tommy Robinson is a perfect example of the result of a man who's been actively speaking out those things and receiving the full force of these institutions that are being driven by the spirit of censorship. The documentary that was published by Tommy Robinson is available on YouTube. It's called Silenced, to allow those who want to look for themselves and make their own opinion of the situation. I really encourage it because it's eye-opening.
This is a documentary about the unholy alliance between the media, the justice system, and our politicians. How they conspire to suppress free speech, how they pervert democracy, and how the truth and your freedoms are just two of the casualties. We will show how the mainstream media deceives people, how they ignore the truth, how the lies of the virtue signal in BBC, ITV and Channel 4 are all about their poisonous agenda, no matter the cost to innocent people. It's also a documentary about how an everyday playground incident between two young lads was spun into global news, at a terrible cost to so many people, not least the two young lads themselves. We will show how the law is being abused, how people driven by hateful ideologies attempt to intimidate and silence anyone who dares to challenge the so-called progressive, so-called liberal narrative.
Another case is statistics on gang violence that's been increasing in Sweden. In 2015, there's been the bombings that begins to spike noticeably, going from 100 to 150 bombings a year, where before it was less. In 2018, there's been official records showing that 162 confirmed explosions. There was a sharp rise, and this is where it started catching international attention. And in 2024, there were reported 129 confirmed detonations, slight decrease from 2023. But when we think about the included attempts and preparations, the total exceeded 300. And another word from the Swedish Prime Minister, Ulf Kristersson, I don't know if I'm saying it right, where he said that Iran is using organized and violent criminal gangs to carry out serious attacks within Sweden, which he called the Foxtrot Network. And you see this importation of Middle Eastern gangs into Sweden, and there's been an increase in crime gangs, which is being caused by it. Then there's the criminologist Manny Gerald that has noticed that bombing often stem from vulnerable areas, which are predominantly immigrant populated. So you see a lot of statistics that are pointing to this idea, and without forgetting the idea of like 61 different no-go zones, which are zones that are predominantly populated by immigrants, where there's a strong recommendation for the Swedish people not to go into. 61 of them have been reported, where you see really those ghettos being formed, where there's no acclimatization to a Swedish culture, nothing. There's these two different cultures existing within the country. And there's places where even the law enforcers of Sweden are struggling to operate. And this is where you got to think about that statement. because a nation, a people, it's not their territory, it's the people, a culture. And when you import all those people within another territory, what happens? They keep reproducing the same culture. They create the same country that they left, which had their own problems here in the new country. Now, other statistics on knife statistic and crime in UK. According to the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, MOPAC, in 2017, 69% of offenders in knife crimes resulting in injury in London were from Black, Asian, or a minority ethnic background, with the most of them were actually from Black individuals. They form the largest group, and given London's population is roughly 13% Black, this indicates an overrepresentation. Or in March 2014, knife crime in the UK, it was at a historical low. And when it comes to the Office of National Statistics, ONS, there were 23,945 offenses committed over the previous year. But in 2019, that amount doubled. Knife-related offenses in England and Wales began rising again in 2015. 2015, the magical year. This increase was gradual at first, but in 2017, the number per year had risen by 50%. And again, there's this hiding of ethnicities behind those crimes. In Sweden, historically, the Swedish National Council for Crime Prevention used to publish reports that included data on immigrant backgrounds, but the explicit ethnic breakdowns had been less emphasized in public releases. And even in 2017, there was the decision by the Swedish National Council of Crime Prevention to stop producing details about the origin of the crime statistics, the origin or the ethnicities behind the people who committed the crimes. And it was framed as a resource allocation issue. In UK, there's been also periods of reluctance to or selective reporting, and some critics have been saying that there's been a lack, of open publicly reporting on who was behind the sexual offenses and where they were not fully disclosed. And there's also influence here in Canada, which is the country I'm in, because you see Canada is already in the situation. Another fact is sometimes the country may not have the ability to import all of those people. You see, in the army, there was this idea of many virtues that we try to implement, practice that we had on the wall. And one of those virtues or values was the intendance of resources. There's this idea that it seems that the only virtue that we're able to have now is wanting to be open-hearted and accept everyone. But now we don't realize that there might be an actual shadow side of it. Instead of realizing that it might actually be virtuous to say, no, we cannot accept other people, and say, look, we have to take care of the people here. We don't have enough resources, and try to fill in this pot, and realizing that it's breaking. That may be actually more virtuous to say, no, we're going to stop filling the pot because it started to overflow. We have this amount of food banks, people going through the food banks that has been increasing in highs that have never been seen before. The failed immigration policy has led to increase in people going to food banks, but there's also the problem of infrastructures. And you see this image right there, which is the cycle that immigration is causing, the heightening of the price of, because there's more demand, there's the heightening of the prices of houses. A lot of people will say, we need to import people for jobs. Canadians, they're not producing children, so we're lacking people, right? And immigrants are producing more people. But the thing is, what is actually the cause of the reduction in Canadians having children? There's people who want to have children, but they want actually a house, a place where they can actually raise them. And what's causing the idea of house prices rising up, a lot of it has to do with actually immigration, increasing the demand. And because the demand increases, the price of infrastructures and houses increase. And we're not building enough houses to allow all of the immigrants, the social net that we have, it's being destroyed, it's being crumbling. We don't have enough infrastructure. And then the aspect of censorship in Canada here takes the form of things like the Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, which says that the purpose of the bill, it aims to regulate online platforms to combat harmful content, including hate speech. And that's where you got to be careful with hate speech, or the motion 108, Islamophobia, which really, those two bills are more weaponized, and you got to tell yourself, who is the person that decides what is hate speech, right? But we don't like what you're saying. Oh, you're speaking negatively about Islam. Oh, that's Islamophobia. Now, your hate speech, you're censored. This is what happens. There's this kind of whole narrative that's building up in a place where we're not allowed to criticize somebody else's culture. It's cultural relativism. We can criticize somebody else's culture, or we can even criticize Islam, for example, because I believe that there's an increasing Islamist problem, fundamentalist Islamists that are causing problems within the country.
And you've been talking about Britain's extremism problem. You're somebody who speaks out against anti-Semitism. You speak out in favour of moderate Islam as opposed to extremist Islam. What's your analysis of the state of affairs in Britain? Because we've got the Labour government right now considering defining Islamophobia in a way that some say might open the back door to blasphemy laws.
I think you have more. Well, thank you for having me. And I think you have more extremists in UK than you have in the Middle East.
Really?
At this stage, absolutely. The things that some of the Islamists say in various mosques, and we have been seeing that online. The terminology they use, the analysis they make, the statements they actually make, they would not be able to say it all the way in Afghanistan, for example, or in Iraq.
Even through our Canadian immigration, we've invited something called the Khalistan movement, which is a more extremist Hindu movement, which is the idea of building their own nation, which have been rising in voices in Canada, and that the Indian government told us to be careful because we're importing those kind of people, and our government didn't really listen. And you see all these information in the infiltration of those kind of terrorist movement within our country, producing a destruction, really, of the social fabric and endangering. Or even in the US, there's like this whole economy from people allowing people to cross the borders legally, to hotels allowing people to come in, where there's this dynamic even in America, New York City, these migrant hotels, where it seems like there's this dynamic now where allowing people inside of our countries where they don't need to actually do it like the old generation, where they went in legally, where they actually had to learn the language, assimilate to the culture, and work hard to adapt. But now it's like doors are open, we can allow anyone. And we're actually seeing a replacement in countries like Ireland. And I believe that's something that the Lord wants to put highlight on. Not for the fact of hating the immigrant, but realizing that there's also a need to reestablish the masculine in the sense of safe boundaries, to rebalance the toxic feminine that we've been into a more masculine, where we might need to stop self-censorship because we don't want to offend but speak the truth in love. And there's been an example of countries that have helped produce this mass immigration. A lot of time it's more the right-wing voices that are speaking against mass immigration that are being snuffled. And when those often are put into, if you look at Giorgia Meloni, that's been put into power, a more right-wing politician, there's been this 60% decrease in mass immigration because she actually targeted different things like organized crime. It kind of allows these illegal transition between those countries. And she asked also for the cooperation of North African countries. And there's been also a focus on returning people, violent criminals. This is what I believe the Lord is saying. It's a time to align with a place where there's a need to rebalance, to actually not hate the immigrant, no, but to actually protect the boundaries, to realize that there's actually an actual replacement. And that most of the countries that happen to be the safest in the world, they're the most homogenetic. And the thing with homogeneous countries, we'd have the same often culture, ethnicity, background, things similarly, like Japan, South Korea, Iceland, Denmark, Finland. They're known to be peaceful and thriving societies. So personally, me living in Canada, I wouldn't want the majority of the population, which I see being more and more foreign, I wouldn't want that to happen because I see that the mix of culture often without good assimilation. I'm not against immigration, but without good assimilation of what we're having, this is really something that is problematic. And I don't really adhere to the cultural Marxist framework where the white cis male is somehow the source of all problems in the world, but I actually really see this white culture as having built Western civilization and safe countries, and that includes some Asian countries too. So it's something that I tend to be grateful for, and see the problem where when this population is replaced, there's a culture that comes with it that is also replaced. And now you also have to think about something. It'd be weird if I went to China and I saw most of them being Africans. It'd be weird if I went to Japan and most of the people there be, even Middle Eastern or white. So it's this idea that it's weird sometimes for people to say that, oh, I want Europe to be for Europeans. But it's not weird to say that, oh, we want Chinese to be for Chinese, Africa for Africans, Saudi Arabia for Saudi Arabians, Japan for Japanese people. I just want to end it with this clip from Dalai Lama, which is really eye-opening. And maybe to make people realize that, no, it's not only the racists who are talking about Europe being for Europeans. Anyways, I'm ending with this.
Europe for Europeans. The European country should take these refugees and give them education and training, and then aiming is return to their own land with certain skill. And then European countries also have the moral responsibility to rebuild their own country. European people, so better keep Europe for Europeans. But meantime, take these refugees and help maximum way. And the aim is to rebuild their own area, their own country. I feel.
And if these people from Afghanistan or the Middle East want to stay in Europe, shouldn't they be allowed to?
Limited number, okay. But the whole Europe eventually become Muslim country, impossible. Or African country, also impossible. I think England, the small island, 90% become Indian. Then I don't know.